Oh, yeah.
Okay, so welcome again, everyone. And so I would like to, I think most of you know Maryanne King, and if you don't, you're certainly going to remember her by the end of the presentation because she's absolutely fabulous.
Uh,
So Maryanne is going to be doing a presentation today in relation to substance use health in the field of ADR. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maryanne to introduce herself. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to share a screen. Well, I'll have Maryanne introduce herself, and then I'll share the screen. So Maryanne, please. Thank you so much for joining us today and for all the hard work you did in preparing for this.
so, y'all, I'm not going to lie. There's a portion of this morning that is absolutely having been voluntold into helping my friend Vicky and Amanda with this presentation today. So I'm glad to see you, and I say welcome, friends, because really this is. I'm hoping that we're going to have a conversation this morning about how all of us, what experience each of us has, working with families that are using substances through our ADR practice. So I'm Maryanne King. I am both a family group conference coordinator and a child protection mediator, and I'm located in Ottawa. And I think I'm funny, and I hope by the time noon rolls around, you will too. So, Vicky, I'm going to get you to give us the PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
Anybody who knows me knows the PowerPoints are not my strong suit, y'all. So, but I wanted to make something a little pretty for you. And Vicky's going to be my friend and run it for me.
I am going to do that. And if there are any questions, please put them in chat. And because I'm not sure whether we'll see but I'm also going to spotlight Marianne.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I thought you'd enjoy that.
Oh, Lord. And I know,
Um,
I think I can figure out how to take that off myself, actually. Side by side gallery there, that's better. Because who
okay,
wants to see my face at 10:49 in the morning?
we all do.
Okay.
Okay, so hopefully I did the spotlight correctly. So, okay,
And
over
in
to you.
keep thank you, Vicky. In keeping with the idea of a conversation, you can put questions in the chat, but you're welcome to unmute because most of us have worked together for a long time, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, far more than I'm looking forward to hearing my own voice. So we thought today we'd look a little bit. I think the why I was asked to come and talk about this is along the way when we do our CP Med Connects and in various trainings we've all done together, I have been talking about how we work successfully with families that are using substances and making sure that their voice is heard at the table. So, I think Vicky and Amanda wanted me to talk about that a little bit more today, and it's my pleasure to come and share a little bit about what I do, and again, in hoping that you will also share as well. So, Vicky, we're going to go to slide 2 very briefly. We're going to look at barriers. We're going to try to look at how to see things through a harm reduction lens, and we're going to try to talk about some creative ways to do our work. So, number 3. So, in my work in child protection mediation and family group conferencing, it's shown me how often families who are using substances are talked about without actually being present. I'm just going to rearrange my screen here. Just stand by for one sec. There we go. I want to be able to see everybody. Families are frequently described through kind of risk and compliance, but they're rarely invited into having kind of a meaningful dialogue. So today I want to focus on how we can change that by viewing ADR through a harm reduction lens. This approach isn't about lowering standards. It's about increasing safety and dignity and participation. Harm reduction is from my best way of understanding it, is a practical, health-based approach to substance use. It focuses on safety rather than perfection, and it recognizes that change is not always linear. In our work with families and children, harm reduction means planning for safety. So clear boundaries, predictable routines, protective adults and supports, agreed upon responses when risk increases. Harm reduction tends to keep parents engaged. I mean, when I say parents, I mean parents and caregivers. And engagement supports honesty, something that, a lot of the families that we work with reflect for us that they have spent their entire involvement with child welfare keeping their coping strategies really private, because when it becomes public knowledge with child welfare, then oftentimes that's got some catastrophic side effects which can lead to the removal of their children. So they're used to secrecy. And when we talk about honesty in building agreements and in ADR, it's a very difficult thing for families to have faith that that honesty isn't going to lead to further problems. But if we can, engagement in the process can support honesty, and honesty can support safety. Um, Vicky, remind me what time I'm before I fly through this. You're muted. I think it's 10:45, 11:45, sorry. S- Stand by. I just want to confirm it's 11:45. I need to wrap up by. Thumbs up? Yes. Yes. Okay. Oh dear. Okay. Okay. We can go back to the PowerPoint now. And there we go. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. Vicky, we'll go on to the next one. So, substance use, as we know, is common in child welfare involved families. And again, what is less common is meaningful participation by folks that are using substances. Many professionals assume parents must be sober or stable before engaging in ADR. Um, Substance use is a health issue. It's not a moral failing. And it exists on a spectrum, and it's often connected, as we talked about this morning, to trauma and grief and mental health, pain, survival. People don't typically use substances in isolation. Many are managing untreated trauma, chronic stress, systemic barriers. For some, substance use is actually an attempt to cope rather than to cause harm. Abstinence is not the only indicator for safety. Stability, predictability, and protective strategies matter. No, yeah, yeah, I'm there. Hang on. So, stand by. Sorry, I just scanned too quickly here. When we treat substance use as a health issue, we ask different questions. What supports are needed to reduce risk? What conditions help this parent show up safely? What agreements build capacity instead of creating failure points? Because we've all seen those types of agreements that show what happens when somebody messes up. This approach centers around child safety and preserving dignity and trust and engagement. So when we wait for stability, decisions are often made without that person being present. So when a parent is actively using substances, barriers accumulate very quickly. Transportation instability, housing insecurity, shame and fear of judgment, court pressures, the feelings of surveillance, mental health symptoms, withdrawal or medication timing, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, fear that participation will be used against them, basic needs like access to a shower or clean clothes to feel that they can even show up to an in-person meeting without those deep feelings of shame. But often the biggest barriers are kind of professional beliefs that ADR should wait until someone's ready, that clarity requires sobriety, that risk automatically equals incapacity. If we wait for perfect readiness, ADR may not happen at all. So we'll go to the next one. So the guiding principles in our work, dignity is number one. So when dignity is lost, engagement collapses. People disengage when they feel judged or shamed or dismissed. Respect isn't a courtesy, it's a condition for participation. And without trust, agreements fail. We know that. Harm reduction, participation, as I've said, doesn't require abstinence. Safety can be planned for even when substance use continues. The focus isn't on proving sobriety, the focus is on reducing risk to the child. And clear expectations and practical safeguards matter more than perfection. Meaningful participation or voice and choice. Parents need real opportunities to be heard. You can imagine when you do your intakes with folks and it's the first time that they're able to tell their story to you. I like to call it it's without the yeah, but. And oftentimes, people that are coming into our offices, whether they're virtual or in person, are in a position where they tell their side of the story, their reality, their version of it. And they're shocked when we're not challenging that version because it's not ours to challenge. Oftentimes, if they're talking to child welfare, their job is to say, well, that's not our understanding of what happened. And there's a challenge in the way it was experienced. And so I don't know about you, but in your ADR intakes, having someone be given the opportunity to tell their story without a yeah, but. I like to, a protection supervisor, when I very first started doing this work, said it was like a big pressure bubble, that when you just allow the person to tell the story, the that pressure bubble kind of diminishes and allows for people to talk about what maybe could come next. And so that's to me what meaningful participation starts with. Not all decisions are made in advance. Participation means influence and not, presence. When parents see their input reflected in agreements, engagement increases. I can remember as I started out as a family group conference coordinator before I became a mediator, and I can remember watching families reclaim authorship over the outcome, like taking the pen in FGC in that family private time, and then in mediation, inviting families to become the authors of how they would reduce risk. Created the coolest outcomes, and outcomes that had longevity because they weren't being told what to do by another resource. They weren't being given ideas. And anytime I have been called in and those of us who do family group conferencing, anytime I've been called in to family private time because they feel they really need a professional in there to guide it, and they just need to be reminded that in fact they don't. Um, uh, I say, if I'm in here, I'm going to come up with ideas, and they're not mine. It's not my family, it's yours. And really encouraging families to have a real voice in how they want to protect their children is probably one of the coolest things that we offer, I think. Comments, questions, concerns? Flexibility. An imperfect process that happens is better than a perfect one that never does. Rigid requirements can exclude the very people we need at the table. Flexibility allows for setbacks without collapse. It creates space for learning and adjustment and progress. And consistency can exist without rigidity. So those I would say are kind of the guiding principles of how to, and I welcome anybody else and obviously safety is the thread that pulls all the guiding principles together. Vicki, we'll go to the next one. Thank you. So, substance use through a trauma-informed lens. And let's be clear, I do not have an expertise in this. This is just how I have been doing this work. And I love learning new ways to look at it and think about it. Substance use, as we know, is intertwined with trauma, mental health challenges, experiences of violence. Behaviors we may see reflect coping rather than defiance. And language, the way we speak to each other, really matters. It shapes whether a participant feels welcome or ashamed. We often hear phrases like they're choosing drugs over their kids, they won't understand anything. These statements, reframing is one of the big tenets of what we do. The ways to reframe that: substance use is driving decisions. Uh, Addiction is taking precedence over parenthood. All the ways that we look at the way people think about somebody who uses substance, they're prioritizing substance use over parenting responsibilities. Their choices are centered on drugs rather than their children's needs. We can talk about substance use can be a coping strategy, and information may need to be shared in supportive ways. Engagement in itself can support stabilization. We've seen folks that are totally disengaged to what is happening with their children, and through an ADR process are brought back to the table. And, um, you know, I think that one of the big struggles that we don't talk enough about is the kin experience, who've been there from day one watching their family member succumb to substance use and what that's done to their family. Asking them to turn a page and try again is often one of the big barriers that we face in the work that we're doing. So we are reminded that language really matters when we're dealing with people, to try to invite them back to the table and increase capacity in their family members who really feel like they're done with them. Any comments? All right, we'll keep going. We're flying through here, Vicky.
There'll be lots of time for discussion.
Okay. So safety is always the threshold. Safety through harm reduction doesn't need to be, there were times historically, I don't know about the rest of you, where abstinence was it. Like you had to be, we talked about sobriety only as the only option for the checklist for contact with children. So we talk about safety. Participation's based on current capacity and not promises of change. Change is, if change can happen, that's great. But what can we do today in the circumstances this person finds themselves in now? What can we do with that reality? The key question is whether the parent can engage safely in this moment. Safety means the parent can understand information with support. Safety means the parent can express their views without causing harm. It also means the process does not place children or others at risk. When these conditions are met, the process adapts to include the parent. When they're not, the process pauses to restore safety. A pause is a safeguard, it's not an exclusion. The door remains open when safety can be reestablished. So I find that these types of families that we assist through ADR, we have to be really creative. And maybe we keep the file open a little longer instead of, well, it didn't work. Well, that's it. We're just going to shut it down. I tend to kind of see what can be done, try again, be creative, be flexible.
Mhm.
I'll take the next one. So practical strategies, I know you all know this already. Format can either support or block participation. Traditional long sessions are often unrealistic. I mean, we've been in mediations, I think most of us, or family group conferencing, where a parent is clearly suffering withdrawal symptoms. Their fatigue is overwhelming. They can hardly sit up. The alternatives would be shorter sessions, pardon me, phone or video attendance, shuttle mediation. If, I have had folks that are so deeply ashamed by how they look that the only way they would attend is if they were in their own space. Staggered meetings, small repeated contact often builds more trust than one intense meeting. Additional strategies to reduce risk and engagement. You really talk about the agenda in advance. One issue per session rather than like a global resolution approach. Built-in breaks, we always talk about that, but that regulates attention and stress. Support persons identified ahead of time. Written, obviously, we're doing our reports after each time that we're engaged so that we're following up. check-ins at the start to assess capacity that day in that moment, flexible scheduling based on stability rather than convenience, and predictable routines that reduce anxiety and defensiveness. For, I think, you know, making sure that everybody knows exactly what to expect really can diminish anxiety. I was reading this out to my mother-in-law in preparation for today, and she said, "Are you going to feed them? Are you going to feed all these people that are coming? Because they might be starving." So, my Millie, we call her Millie, my Millie would like to remind you that snacks are really important when we are taking care of folks that are coming to make big decisions for their families. Next one, please. Timing and environment. Timing matters. Early mornings, I don't know about y'all. I don't think I would run an ADR with a family that was managing substance use first thing in the morning. Typically, as you know, early mornings are often the hardest time of day. Withdrawal, medication schedules, and fatigue really affect capacity. Sessions should be scheduled when the parent is most able to participate, and they get to decide. Maybe they are on their game first thing in the morning, and maybe it's later in the afternoon where fatigue overwhelms them. Again, we're building in breaks. And we build in breaks anyways, but I think the breaks are, I have actually had told parents that or participants that they can message me or, flag me that they need a break well before. Sometimes we even just start and go around and introduce ourselves, and somebody needs to step out for a minute. We just need to be mindful of what that person requires to help regulate themselves to stay in their chair and try to get through one agenda item at a time. The other thing is, and we talk about this anyways, this is on our radar, choose environments that reduce shame and for families. There are times I think in our more remote communities where you have to use the children's aid office because that's all you've got. Apart from those types of things, we try hard not to use an environment that would just by its nature increase anxiety. And a simple phrase to use is, we can structure today in a way that works for you. We can structure our joint meeting or our conference in a way that works best for you. The next one. So support and communication, we encourage parents to bring supportive folks with them, or not parents, participants. And that can include a family member, a peer, or most often recently, I don't know about you folks, but most often that is a professional support that they're bringing, perhaps a Canadian mental health person with them, or a counselor, somebody's attending with them more in a professional capacity. We also talk about how are they going to take care of themselves before, during, and after. That's, I think, an important conversation. The role of support people are clarified in advance so they understand exactly what their job is. And sometimes they help with understanding regulation and follow through. And I have seen, I did an intake with somebody 2 weeks ago or last week, excuse me, and she did bring her professional support with her. And I watched the way that this person helped her understand some of the information that was being shared in a really appropriate way. It was supportive. And it's a reminder to really use clear and simple language, avoid jargon and legal shorthand. Information is delivered in small, manageable pieces. Key pieces are repeated and checked for understanding. Participants are invited to ask for clarification without consequence. Silence, confusion, or dysregulation are treated as signals rather than resistance. And we clarify boundaries early. Everyone knows what topics are in scope for that day. And we also talk about what behaviors may not be acceptable as well. So even though we're really trying to have people engaged, we also want to make sure that safety and respect are, still the key tenets of what people can expect from each other on that day. Boundaries are enforced consistently to protect safety. Participation needs to be safe enough and not perfect. I think that's probably the biggest message. Support is added when capacity drops, and the process adapts to preserve engagement without increasing risk. So, we're trying to keep people at the table, and we're trying to figure out what does that person, that individual who's different from the rest, different from you and I, different from the family that you saw before them, what do you need? How can I be of service to you to help you participate in this process? So the decision lens, I use simple, kind of like a simple internal lens. Can the parent understand what is happening with support? The way that they show me that is through conversation that we're having, whether or not they understand what we're all about and what's going to happen. Can they express their views? Is everyone safe enough? If yes, we proceed with adaptations, and if no, we pause. Pause does not mean someone is necessarily excluded. Agreements can build capacity when parents are using substances. Um, so, any thoughts, comments, concerns so far? One of the things I wanted to do, and please unmute anytime.
Are we
Vicky, anything?
taking the PowerPoint down now?
Yeah.
You can leave it up for now.
Okay.
I made a list of some practical things for kind of building agreements. Uh, what are some of the ways in which we can take what I've just said and talk about how to build agreements? So for as a short example, starting with shorter parenting time that builds gradually, keeping expectations simple and concrete. When we're writing agreements, whether no matter what form of ADR we're choosing, it's to be clear with families. I find the clearer we can be, start times, end times, those types of things are really helpful. And that's certainly what's been expressed to me by family members that have come into the process. So I can continue with that list, or I invite anybody to unmute and tell me their experiences that they have had in terms of trying to build engagement with families that are suffering and struggling with substance use. So while you think about that, uh, okay, can you take down the PowerPoint? Yeah, sure we can.
1 second, please. Okay, here we go.
Thank you, tech support. I think you should have called yourself tech support. So in terms of agreements, as I said, starting with shorter parenting time. So now what we're talking about is not just the process. Now it's like the outcome. What are some practical ideas for how to help families? And remember, we don't decide these things. The families themselves decide these things, and we're there to guide it. And to build capacity on ideas. So you're using clear start time and end times when it comes to parenting time now. Keeping expectations simple and concrete. Reducing the number of conditions. So it's if there's a laundry list of items, then I think we're going to lose people. Focusing on safety rather than perfection. Using plain language. I'm still hearing folks tell me that it's very legal laden jargon that's they're coming out of an ADR process with, and we really want to, especially when someone clarity comes and goes, we want to be as clear as we can with plain language, defining what safe enough looks like, naming protective factors that are already present. And so in any of these things, you can see how as a mediator, you would ask those questions. What would be a good start time and end time for parenting time? Where's a good place to start? You know, supporting safe enough contact for children includes supervised visits as a support rather than a punishment. So even talking about the difference between you're being supervised to
Mhm,
you're being supported in your parenting time
mhm.
till such time as everybody feels that that maybe could change and maybe it's not going to change. But it's really it's about language, choosing supervisors or support people that the parent also trusts, using familiar or neutral child-friendly locations when it's safe enough, keeping visits predictable and routine, avoiding last-minute changes, building consistency before increasing duration. So, we're often saying for the first 3 months, it can look like this, and then this is what would need to happen. So it's like a stepped approach. Maintaining connection during setbacks. So in the event that a participant has a setback, what's going to happen? And that's where, remember I said the comment about honesty, that was a really big shift for me, was talking about being honest. And that I think especially came true in doing openness mediation, um, and talking about it's okay to say, this is not a good week for me. I can't do this. It's not safe enough for me to participate this week. Can I check back in with you next month? um, and talking about how that looks rather than you you tried to pass by coming and you were not on your game and what the consequences of that might look like.
And if I may, Marianne, that takes preparation of all the parties, right? So that if someone has the courage to say that this is not a good week, to really honor that, because it takes a lot of guts to be able to acknowledge that, right? And so, preparing the other parties for what do you do in that event? Because ultimately, you don't want children to be set up for disappointment and that sort of thing. But at the same time, really trying to maximize how to make the contact as positive as possible, right? So,
And I think, when I was listening to our keynote this morning, oftentimes, historically, I have brought a professional in to talk about substance use so that families can understand it maybe from a different lens. And then when you talk with Vicky raises a very good point that it's the person who's using substances that you're trying to increase engagement, increase being honest about what's going on, but it's the recipient on the other end, it's the other party that we need to really prepare to try again if it's a kin family, and that's a tough ask. Or if it's a the other party is not maybe known to them except for through whatever disclosure was given to them. So if it's an openness file and it's not a kin situation, and you have another family that is new to the situation and they only know about this parent through what has been disclosed to them, and that's scary and they don't know what to do with that. And so we talk about why is it better to know ahead of time, even if it means, sometimes we talk about the child won't be told until, the day before or the day of. And, it increases communication between those parties so that they can say, I'm sorry, I can't do this. And sometimes we even role play those things so that we can, give folks language for what they can use to say rather than say, I'm using or those are shameful, shameful things that families experience. And we want to try to step out of that lens and look at a lens that says, today I can't and it's not good for me or for you or for this child. And so, the recipient of that information hopefully isn't saying, well, that person's choosing drugs over their child. We talk about why their dysregulation may increase as contact with their children is coming because it's it's full of feelings. Who knows how long it's been since they've seen their child or had contact or had an update, and if they're using substances to cope, trying to understand it from a different lens. And that means everybody at the table, including the society, uh,
Mhm.
which is a tough it's a tough role we play. But our job isn't to shame anybody. It's to help people try to see it from a different way. Because at the end of the day, I'll often say, is this approach working for you? When I'm dealing with a family that's stuck in the way that they're seeing something. Um, and typically it's not. And it's harmful to themselves to be looking at their sister and through this lens, even though the reality is, and we can't change that reality. And we're not talking about ever lowering the bar for safety, but just trying to see it in a bit of a different perspective. Comments, thoughts? Anybody else's experience?
Um, in that regard, in terms of language, I use this with all my families. Um, and I say not if, but when you're late, when you can't show up. Um, what are we going to do? What's our plan B? How are we going to handle it with communication? How are you going to handle it with communication? Because as I hear you saying, we want people to succeed, right? We want to set them up for success. So even with families without addiction problems, they are still demonizing each other. They still don't like each other. They're still looking for every reason to, place blame. But here, even more, I'm feeling the need for this, and I love this conversation about today. I can't, and how to approach that. So thank you.
Likewise, I love what you've just said. When this happens, what will we do? Look at just the small change of that word, how powerful that will be when we're communicating with families, because it allows space for when that happens. So I like that
So
a
I
lot.
have a question with that, though. I'm going to actually contradict myself.
Okay.
If you say with a family with addiction, when this happens, might you be saying, I assume you're going to screw up? Like, how do we manage that?
So it sometimes, and Vicky, I'll invite you to answer as well. But sometimes what I've done is I talk about if you're not feeling well, when you're unwell. That doesn't necessarily mean that you've been using. So, but the assumption is you don't feel well enough to participate. And that gives room for anything from I didn't sleep well to I'm not regulated to I have been using to I used yesterday and I can't open my eyes this morning. So I don't know, Vicky, what about you?
So, I mean, certainly one of the things I try to reinforce is that no one is expecting perfection. And that I, as a parent, I'm not a perfect parent. I've never met a perfect parent. And life happens around us that we can't predict. We can try to plan for as many circumstances as possible, but life happens around us. So, what happens when circumstances present themselves? And how do we then best manage that? So we take the shame away from it. We're not saying it's going to happen, but when it does, then what's the plan, right?
Yeah. But it's a good point, Marty. It's a good point because it's not like we're giving permission. Not we, I
Mhm.
don't mean, you know,
Mhm.
we're there as the grandmaster note taker. But I think that trying to craft language that is respectful and
Mhm.
dignified when someone has a challenge.
Okay.
Paula,
I agree with almost everything that has been said, but I do
almost
get
hit me, sister. I'm here
I'm
for it.
gonna hit you. I'm gonna
Hit
hit
me.
you. And I think this is where we need to consider class and culture and all of those pieces, because as much as I appreciate the reframes that's often not the language that's meaningful within the family system. And I'm thinking of a family in particular I was involved with for quite a lengthy period of time where there was an extremely high level of success, trust building, restoration, and these people are still probably occasionally using hard drugs. The language that you're talking about, which is a bit flowery, some people might find it as respectful, but some people appreciate direct dialogue. It doesn't mean that it's disrespectful just because it's direct. So, for example, in this case, a kin who deeply loves her, her family member, she has the kids. I think she'd be very offended by her saying, "Oh, I'm just not well today." I think what she would deeply respect would be for in this case, it was the mother and the stepfather to say, "You know what, we used and we can't see the kids." So all I'm suggesting is that the language needs to be driven not by us, but what makes sense for the participants and their dynamic. Do you see what I mean? So I'm not being critical, but I just think sometimes we get caught up in our own dialogue around what might be helpful rather than looking at the language that's meaningful within that family system, if that makes sense. And I know you know this, Maryanne, I'm just sort of...
No, each family that we deal with needs the process tailored to how they communicate. And sometimes that's a punch in the face with very direct language. They decide what it looks like. What we're answering is when someone feels too ashamed to say, because I was using last night, I can't see my children, there is another way to do it. But it's not each agreement that is crafted, each family group conference report that's developed will be unique to whatever that family needs it to be. I always liken it to when we go into FGC and we talk about what are the guidelines for respectful discussion. Some families say, we're going to use the big swears in here because that's how we communicate.
Exactly.
Well, that's their choice.
Yeah.
So each family, our job is simply to help guide the discussion. And the reason why we talk about the flowery language is because there is times where families are so ashamed
I agree.
they can't
I agree.
talk about it. So
Yeah.
it's an alternative to the very direct way that families need to communicate with one another.
Yeah.
And
I think I guess what I was looking at when you were speaking was it being an option as opposed to the way you do things. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no. What we're talking about here is I think that ADR in all its form is the art of having difficult conversations.
Yep.
And for each family that we cross paths with, they help guide us in how they want to have that conversation with us. And so if it's direct language that's very clear and very specific, then that's what they need. That they'll tell us that. But it's in the times where we have previously had families that couldn't engage without a harm reduction approach. This is an option.
Yep.
Any other comments, questions?
Can I add another 2 cents? All right.
Sure.
I'm going to say "and," my favorite word, and I do use this in mediation.
I love it.
I think I need that.
Yeah, it's very handy. Sometimes I just sneak it up without me in the frame. Yeah. But and I don't. It really is an "and." Yes, we listen to other people's language and ways of communicating. It's all good. And I don't think we should undermine what is our wheelhouse, which is communication. At the end of the day, their mediation becomes perhaps their way of communicating is not resourceful. Maybe it's not getting them what they want. Maybe the tough love is cute, but it's shutting down voices. So we're always, I think, balancing. We start out with our language, then they teach us, then we teach them, then we model for them. So I'm not sure that it's all or one, but
Mm.
the more tools we have and the more gently we can wade into the water, the better. So I appreciate what everyone has said about this. Thank you. I do want to know at some point, you may be covering this, Maryanne, sorry, about how you treat emotions at the table, because emotions are always welcome and normalized at in my mediations, and I'm curious about even anger, how that comes up.
Always space for feelings. We talk about that, part of me leading in to any of the, I mean, we are dealing with the biggest, the highest stakes mediation there is. And there's always space for any of the big feels, including anger and frustration. We talk about it being, I want to know how everybody else handles it, but we talk about making sure that whatever you're saying is heard rather than the way that it's being experienced in the room diminishes that message. So, I'll always want folks to remember that if they can deliver what they're saying, even if it's in a louder voice, in a way that doesn't feel threatening or intimidating or bordering on violence, that their message is going to be heard, maybe for the first time. Um, like sometimes we build in breaks around those big feels. It just depends. I'm interested to hear what everybody else is doing. Vicky?
So I'll give you an example of that because I think it speaks to one particular situation. So in the situation I'm referring to, the gentleman had time, and then there was one particular incident that tipped the scale. He became very aggressive, damaging property in the home. Children were present. Children were fearful. Children hid in the closet. Mom and dad are separated, and now the children are refusing to see their father. And it's been a chunk of time where there has not been any contact, given the views and preferences of the children. We won't get into the treatment modality in relation to what's going to happen there, but I think the big thing there was the father is doing a tremendous amount of work to try to address the substance use problems. And mom at that particular time was not ready to hear that because she was so angry at what he had exposed the children to. And so one of the things and it's a balancing act between not wanting to shame someone during a mediation process or an ADR process, while at the same time recognizing the trauma that was created through that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we, and I said, I don't want this next question to be about shame or blame, but I can really see that this has had a tremendous impact on you. And speaking to the mother, can you help so and so understand what that was like for you and what that was like for the children? Not so that, so and so can feel shame about it, but really to truly understand the impact that that has had so that you can then also, it will help be able to move the discussion forward in relation to a lot of the work that has been done and a lot of the work that still needs to be done, right? So, because if we hadn't dealt with the anger and the just sheer rage at, how could you put my kids through that? It wouldn't have mattered how many somersaults he did and whatever he did to try to address, his journey in trying to work on his substance use problems. It would have fallen on deaf ears because the elephant in the room wasn't being addressed, right? So, and that's just one example. So.
I think it's about preparing people for that reality that there's going to be some time where we do talk about big feelings. Oftentimes, I think especially in when it comes to openness, we talk a lot about how the initial parts will be steeped in grief that they wish they were anywhere else in the world. than sitting here talking about what this limited small amount of contact is going to look like. And so we talk about that a lot and name, giving a name to it, but planning it and asking, how do you want me to handle that? So oftentimes opening with, Vicky would rather be anywhere else than here. And that I think helps folks to regulate those feelings a little bit. So Marty, I think there's room for all of it, and talking about it ahead of time is the best thing that I can do in making sure that that there's room for it and that it's safe. But we've all had a blow, like a volcano, where you're scrambling around trying to figure it out in the moment. But typically speaking, we can try to plan for it and say, Vicky's really feeling, she's got big feels today. She's probably going to want to express how she's feeling about that and what that was like. And I think it's all about preparation.
And I think what you're saying, Maryanne and Vicky, I think is so critical to the work. And it's interesting. I just happened to recently have been involved in a few openness files, and it's almost like that grief piece and those difficult conversations, if not invited by the mediator, are kind of this elephant in the room. I don't know if I'm interested in terms of your experience with this, where people just don't really want to go there per se. It's more people coming to the table thinking, well, this should be okay. Let's talk about, you're going to get your 2 contacts a year. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Yeah. So what would you, how do you manage that with a bunch of people that just want to, come to the table, keep it kind of surface level, and like I introduce the grief, I invite the grief, I name the grief, but I'm just interested in terms of
Well,
your thoughts around
I
that.
asked the person who's experiencing the big feel
Yep,
how they want it handled. And I
absolutely. Yep.
offer ideas about how to do that so that they're able to be engaged and stay present in the conversation and not miss something. We talk about if really all what we're doing is leaning into those feelings, and everybody else is, happily moving through agenda items, but you're so stuck you can't hear properly. You can't actually understand what's being said because your feels are so big. What will we do about that? How do you want that handled? Um, and that, they guide it. They'll tell me, I give the option of, saying it, naming it at the beginning. That I have found that typically works. And it also helps all the people that are happy-go-lucky around the table to regulate that approach as well, and kind of get present with maybe what this person's going through. So, Vicky?
Absolutely. I agree with what you said there, Maryanne. And also, the intakes are so critical, not just in terms of gathering information, but the preparation that happens during intake, right? And so we would be talking about that at an intake stage. And when you talk about openness, Paula, where they get into this negotiation and one says 5, one says 2, face to face with this year. During intake, I also, and I do use some analogies where, I'll say to them, unlike, when you're going to your boss to ask for a raise, you might shoot high and they might shoot low, and then you're going to meet somewhere in the middle. Like we're not doing that kind of a negotiation. We're dealing with people's lives. And so, really try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and receive that information. What would it feel like to you to hear? And so let that help guide the discussions, as well as what's in the best interest of the children, because that's always the first and foremost thing that has to be taken into consideration. But you're not getting into this auction, like 5, 2, 3, because then all you are is an auctioneer as opposed to a mediator trying to really navigate maintaining a meaningful and beneficial relationship between the child and whoever the person is that is going to have the openness with, right?
Anybody else? Comments? We have a few minutes left. Swinging back around to harm reduction and agreements. And oh, hi there. I'm wondering if you have any advice for someone who's interested in starting. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, Vicky Visca, who should Vicky call?
Do it. There you go, Paul. That's a simple answer. There you go. So do it. Yeah, just do it. Isn't that?
Always glad to see Brown on the line.
You must work for Nike, Paul. I guess the point here is to become a child protection mediator. There is a process, and because of the nuances and the complexity and the challenges that can be presented to you as a child protection mediator, the entry point to becoming a child protection mediator is to obtain your family mediation training. So you would either need to be an accredited family mediator or have the equivalency of a family mediator. And all that information is online at the OFM, how to become a child protection mediator. You can Google it. If not, I'm always happy to chat with people in terms of the process and how to get your career started in that regard. But the first step is to become a family mediator, because you need that foundation in order to take you into the next level in relation to the child protection mediation. Fabulous question. And anytime you're interested in chatting more about it, I'm always happy to promote it. So
Thanks, Vicky. Remember when we're building agreements that some of the things that I really try to focus on is naming early warning signs that there is a problem, identifying what happens if concerns arise, and clear de-escalation steps. So those are some of the other kind of things that we need to remember. And I hear now the Children's Aid more using language, like, how will I know when today is not a good day, or your whatever language you want to use. Um, and that I think is very helpful. Most families know this about themselves, but having someone identify, look at, I go missing, or I've had one recently say, you can always tell how I'm doing because I'm posting on Facebook and then suddenly I'm not. And so, talking about what to do when those early warning signs happen, I think also helps to reduce the worry and the stress on the other party who is having to manage this. So I just didn't want to miss those things. And I thank you for your time today. In and out 11:45, or are we done at noon?
well, you need to be back into the main room by noon. So
Oh, okay.
if there's other
So
comments,
we still have time. All right. I could talk forever, as y'all know.
so any other questions, comments, we welcome them. We should try to wrap up by 10:50 or 10, at 10:55, by 11:55 at the latest.
Okay, well, I've got other things that I didn't say,
Perfect.
which is, and this is one that's near and dear to Vicky's heart. We don't want to see things like shall,
Oh yeah.
must in your whatever the outcome is, your document that you're coming out with. Replace failure with review. Um, Use collaborative language, whether it feels flowery or not. Help families try to figure out what that language is that works best for them. Um, and the whatever the outcome is from your ADR process shouldn't be a control tool. Building, it's about building capacity. When they're well written, they can help parents succeed, families succeed, instead of proving failure, which I think, I don't know about you, but I can get through periods of times where I feel like that's what this process is being used as. It's basically about building evidence for court.
Yeah.
And we want to try not to do that.
No.
But again, we are, as I like to say, the grandmaster note takers for these families and participants, and all we can do is help to generate ideas. for families when they're before us, and do that in a way that suits them best.
Can you say more about what you mean by that, Maryanne, in terms of building evidence for court? Because that's
So I've got, I don't know, it will be so rigid. If you don't show up at this time and in 5 minutes, then this happens. And it's very rigid. And some
oh,
families need that.
ugh,
And then when
yeah,
they don't, then someone else is saying, well, that's it. You failed.
got
It's
you.
a no show, that you're not seeing that it's over.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm seeing families, the other participants who are the ones who are caring for the children, saying, so if she doesn't show twice, then I don't have to do this anymore. And being stuck
Right.
in
Yeah, yeah,
trying
yeah.
to
Yeah, yeah.
literally erase that parent off of the landscape of people that this child can see. So
Yeah.
it's about trying to, as I
Yeah.
said at the beginning, building honesty builds engagement, and trying to make room for that within agreements, um, hopefully allows children to maintain connections to all the people that love them, all their important people.
Mhm.
Because otherwise, they're pretty quickly told, "You're out. That's it. It's over." And there are some situations where that's necessary, but it
Mhm.
shouldn't be the golden rule.
Well, and there was a time not that far long ago where, there was this unspoken or not unwritten rule about three strikes, you're out, right? You missed three visits or,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I mean,
Punitive.
we know that that's not realistic. So how do you build a plan to promote success as to punish when we know that
Absolutely.
there's going to be struggles, right?
Yeah.
And that struggles aren't seen as failures. That there's room for it, like we talked about with Marty earlier. There's room for it,
Mhm.
without it
Mhm.
being a permission giving tool. Because I appreciated how what Marty had to say about that.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Any other comments, questions, concerns?
Just to piggyback on that, I would say like it's all I found it's powerful when there's a shift to what's being celebrated is the forthcomingness, is the honesty, right? Rather than the hiding from it because fear of retribution or punishment, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes that the new bar is let's be honest, let's be forthcoming. And when it's safe enough to do that, then that's celebrated and that's reinforced.
I had an agreement not that long ago that one adoptive parent would meet with the birth parent at Tim's and have a cup of coffee, um, until they kind of got to know each other, to determine if today was safe enough, today was good enough to be
Oh.
able to then uh, have face-to-face contact with the child. And everybody seemed to feel like they came up with it themselves.
Mhm.
That was their first step, was that person was going to check in the morning of, and try to be as honest as possible about where things
Mhm.
were at. And then because there was angst from the adoptive family about, like, well, like, how do we trust what that person's saying? Then there was this extra step built in that one would go
Mm.
over and have a cup of coffee and see how things kind of get the lay of the land, and go from there. And that seemed to work for them.
Mm.
Added reassurance, um, that they would have a conversation about where things were at, and then the visit would kind of go from there. So really, I think honesty is one of the, and it's so difficult because families that are involved with child welfare are, they have to protect themselves through secrecy. Otherwise,
Mm.
as I said at the beginning, the side effect is catastrophic
Mm.
in their lives.
Mhm.
So, and I hear a lot, like, well, like, I've lost my children, but my neighbor's using crack. We hear a lot about, there's a lot of grief and frustration in what they know maybe some of their peer parents are up to, but they've lost their children. And so I often find that we have to make room for that reality. Um, and then
Yes,
ask that somebody be honest after that is a really tough ask.
I know.
Showing that honesty builds connection, we're asking a lot of somebody to believe that's true, and it won't be used against them.
I know. Yeah,
So it's tricky work.
it really is.
So I want to take this opportunity for thanking Maryanne for being voluntold. to
You
present.
thought I wasn't going to tell them I was.
I know that was supposed to be our
Anybody?
secret. That was supposed to be our secret. So I mean, you know why she was asked. You can see how wonderful Maryanne is in relation to the compassion, the knowledge, the skill. I'm just so very grateful that you took time today to not only share your wisdom, but to encourage participation and discussion, because each and every one of us on this screen have wisdom that can be brought to the table. So thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to Maryanne again. Now, if you have not kept your original Zoom link that you were sent when you registered, then in the chat is the Zoom link. Now, when you click on that, you will have to re-register to go back into the main room. You're going to leave this meeting because this is a completely separate Zoom room. You're going to leave this meeting, join the main room. Hopefully you have your original Zoom link. If you don't, there is a link there that you can register. Please know that Zoom doesn't count you as being registered so many different times, like they keep track of duplications. So please do come back to the main room. We have an inspirational speaker that will be starting right at 12. And I would really like it that no one's late for that because he has some wonderful words of wisdom for us as well. So thank you again, everyone. Feel free to leave the room. And I'm going to have to figure out how to stop recording. I'll figure that out though. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Goodbye.